Okay, so Everyday Use by Alice Walker is a short story. It talks about generation gap, it talks about tradition, it talks about culture. So, in short, if I were to tell you the story, this is about a mother who is called Mama and her two daughters. One is Maggie, the other one is called D, Maggie and D. Both are diametrically opposite characters. So, Maggie is this very shy, very reticent, introvert kind of a girl. She's not at all confident, and we come to know that long back, around 10 to 12 years back, there was a fire in which their house was destroyed, and Maggie's one of her hands had got burnt. So she had this crippled hand, and she's all the time trying to hide that behind the folds of her skirt. And again, because she has no confidence, she's not that very educated or she's not that very smart, she's all the time sticking to her mother, leaning on to the mother for support. So she's this very homely girl, very shy, very plain looking, not very pretty, whatever. All right. Whereas the other girl, her sister D, is totally opposite to what Maggie is. She's this very flamboyant, very fashionable, educated, liberated, that kind of a girl. So we come to know that both Maggie and Mama, they are waiting for D to come home for a visit. So we understand that now D is not staying with them. Now she is gone out. We don't know whether she's working or she's somewhere else. So she comes home visiting. So you can see how she comes home like a visitor, like a stranger, and how for D everything is a kind of novelty, her own custom and culture and tradition, as she can see in her own mother and sister, and the products that are there in the house. For her, all these things are exotica. These are black. Like Africans, these are all African people, right? So for D, coming back to her home is like coming back to a museum. So all the olden things that were made by her ancestors, things like quilt and there is something like a churn made by her one of her uncles who's now dead and gone. All these things, they become objects of you could say exoticism, exotica, like the things that are to be kept in the museum. So she looks at these things from that perspective. And same is the case with quilt. What is a quilt? Kosidi, you call it rajai, kosidi, the think blanket like thing that we all have at home. Not the ready-made blanket, but you may have seen your grandmoms and all must have done this stitching these very comfortable and warm quilts that will keep you warm in the winter or warm during cold season. That is a quilt. So there is this whole tradition, there is this whole culture of quilting in many communities, in many cultures, wherein women get together, they sit, sing, they chat with each other, they support each other, they tell each other their stories, and they sit and stitch this. So this hand stitched quilt made out of rags of clothes. So one quilt would be made from pieces of cloth taken from different you could say discarded clothes or old clothes. So maybe one patch would come from your grandmother, another patch would come from your great grandfather. So there is a history associated with each piece, each bit of the cloth that is stitched to the quilt. So quilt becomes a symbol, it's kind of a tapestry of who you are. It tells you a story about your tradition, your culture, your family values. So there are memories associated with that. So quilt is more than a quilt. And please remember, we are talking about Kosdi. And African cultures, even North India, you'll find it. There is this custom of quilting. So when a daughter gets married, before that, these ladies of the family, neighborhoods, they come together, they sit together, and they do keep on quilting. They make lots of colorful, wonderful quilts, and they're gifted at the time of marriage to the daughter. So it's part of the dowry. Even I've seen in Gujarati communities, girls are given quilts. Now in the modern times, they don't do it much, but still in the older times, even there are some people in the villages and all, they still carry on this custom. So quilt becomes a kind of a connection between you and your past, your roots. Again, it's a symbol of your memory, a memory associated with people in your family. Again, it becomes kind of a tapestry of your tradition, your culture. So for the characters in the story, especially for Maggie and Mama, quilt is a kind of something that connects you with your past. So it is to be used in your everyday life. But then D, she differs in her attitude towards these things. For her, all these things are exoticas, and she's saying that she comes home and she wants to take away the quills. And what is she going to do with the quilt? She's going to hang it up. That's what she's saying. So she's going to exhibit that, put it up on the wall as an exhibit piece, like an exotica, so that people can look at it and admire. And she gets angry at her sister because the mother had made these quilts. Mother as well as Maggie, they had made these quilts, and one day mother was planning to give it to Maggie at the time of her marriage. Whereas the other daughter, even when she went away to college to study and all, she had refused to take the quilts at that time, calling it to be unfashionable, out of date. So she didn't want all that. But now, after many years staying out, staying with the white people, maybe she has understood the value, that exotic value associated with the quills. So now she's come back to claim her property, or come back to claim her right of all these family heirlooms. She wants to take it away. So the mother feels really sad because the other girl, she's got all education, everything, but this girl, Maggie, she doesn't have anything. But then D again gets angry at both mother and sister, saying that you will only spoil all these things because you make quilts and you're going to use it every day. So in 5 years time, Maggie would kind of destroy it. So you are doing a disservice. So that's her way of looking at it. Whereas mother and Maggie, they believe that these things are actually objects of everyday use that is to be used, and it connects you with your past, with your root. It's kind of a tapestry that will tell you about your family history, family story, and it will give you that kind of a warmth. So it is to be used, and once it becomes torn and worn, you're supposed to discard it. So you have two different ways of looking at objects that can be used every day, or you can keep it as exotica. Okay, so that's the story for you. So I want one of you to just read. I put it up on the screen, so please read that. Let's not waste time. Please read.
I will wait for her in the yard that Maggie and I made so clean and wavy yesterday afternoon. A yard like this is more comfortable than most people know. It is not just a yard, it is like an extended living room. When the hard clay is swept clean as a floor and the fine sand around the edges lined with tiny irregular grooves, anyone can come and sit and look up into the elm tree and wait for the breezes that never come inside the house. Maggie will be nervous until after her sister goes. She will stand hopelessly in the corners, homely and ashamed of the burn scar down her arms and legs, eyeing her sister with a mixture of envy and awe. She thinks her sister has held life always in the palm of one hand, that no is a word the world never learned to say to her. You've no doubt seen those TV shows where the child who has made it is confronted as a surprise by her own mother and father tottering in weakly from backstage. A pleasant surprise, of course. What would they do if parents and child came on the show only to curse out and insult each other? On TV, mother and child embrace and smile into each other's faces. Sometimes the mother and father weep, the child wraps them in her arms and leans across the table to tell how she would not have made it without their help. I have seen these programs. Sometimes I dream a dream in which Dia and I are suddenly brought together on a TV program of this sort. Out of a dark and soft-seated limousine, I am ushered into a bright room filled with
I think
many
there's a
people.
problem.
There, I meet a smiling, grey, sporty man like Johnny Carson who shakes my hand and tells me what a fine girl I have. Then we are on the stage, and yes, a large orchid, even though she has told me once that she thinks orchids are tacky flowers. And we
Okay, pause here a while. Pause a while. So now what is happening? we know that Mama and Maggie, they are sitting in front of the yard. I mean, in front of the house. So there's this nice, wonderful yard. It's like an extended room. So it's a very nice, beautiful picture of mother and daughter sitting outside in the yard, waiting for the other daughter to come. And then the mother's talking about her observation about Maggie, and we can see that Maggie is very nervous, and we know that she's going to remain nervous till until the sister comes and goes. So she'll be standing in corner. She's all the time ashamed and homely, and then she's feeling very shy, and then she's ashamed of that burn scars in her arms and legs. And she looks at her sister with a lot of envy and awe. Why? Because the sister is all that she is not. So a totally opposite. And the sister is so confident that she does not no, like that no is a word the world never learned to say to her. That is, sister had everything going for her. That nobody would say no to D. That was the kind of charismatic character she had. Totally opposite to Maggie, who was so shy and so introvertish. And then the mother. Now the story is narrated by Mama. All right. So now Mama is telling us something very funny. So what is she saying? No, you must have seen all these TV shows, these what Dance India Dance and what you have all those music shows and all. I can't remember the name. So there, what do you have? You have the winners or the finalists, and then you have an episode wherein these talented and accomplished people, they are met by their own family members, and there will be something like a question answer session. They'll be crying and hugging, and people would be saying how blessed these people are in order to have a daughter or a son like this. So she's saying that if there is something like this, then D would be the accomplished daughter, and then the mother would be called for the TV show. And then these shows are actually scripted, yes or no? They act. It's everything is actually acting, and they kind of show surprise. Oh my God, I didn't expect my mother on stage, and they burst out and into tears. They hug each other as if they have never seen each other. That's a kind of comic thing they put up for the world, like to fool the world. But then we know it's all scripted. And look at the thing in bracket, a pleasant surprise, of course. What would they do if parent and child came on the show only to curse out and insult each other? See, in these shows, they are all the time hugging and crying and moaning, loving each other, and being very nice to each other. Then she's saying, but in reality, that's not the case in most of the houses wherein parents and children are at fight with each other at loggerheads, right? So what if they come and insult and shout and yell at each other? What will happen to these TV shows? That's what she's saying. So this is what we see. You have the mother and the father weeping, and so I've seen all these programs. So now what is she saying? Sometimes I also see these kind of dreams. So what does she see? D and I are suddenly brought together on a TV program. So the presenter is somebody like Johnny Carson. He's supposed to be a very famous TV presenter. So there's this bright light, and the mother is taken to the studio in a limousine. I mean, not any lesser. So one of the most luxurious cars. So the mother would be taken in a limousine and into this bright room filled with many people. So the presenter would shake her hands and say that you have a very fine daughter. And then you have the mother and daughter embracing. So she's seeing all this in the dream. And then they would pin a large orchid flower onto the mother's dress. But then she remembers that D never liked orchids. She always used to think that orchids are tacky flowers, tacky as in bad, kind of irritating flowers. But in front of the camera, look at the play acting that goes on. Actually, this is nothing but a kind of a dream that she has. So she's equating this with now the daughter's visit. Now the daughter is coming back. So daughter is coming for a visit. So daughter is this very successful person. So we don't know what she is, whatever. But then she's totally different from the mother and the other daughter, that is Maggie. So now she's coming back to telling us what she is in reality. Please continue.
In real life, I am a large, big boned woman with rough, man working hands. In the winter, I wear flannel nightgowns to bed and overalls during the day. I can kill and clean a hog as mercilessly as a man. My fat keeps me hot in zero weather. I can work outside all day, breaking ice to get water for washing. I can eat pork liver cooked over the open fire minutes after it comes steaming from the hog. One winter, I knocked a bull calf straight in the brain between the eyes with a sledgehammer and had the meat hung up to chill before nightfall. But of course, all this does not show on television. I am the way my daughter would want me to be, 100 pounds lighter, my skin like an uncooked barley pancake, my hair glistens in the hot bright lights. Johnny Carson has much to do to keep up with my quick and witty tongue. But that is a mistake. I know even before I wake up. Whoever knew a Johnson with a quick tongue? Who can even imagine me looking a strange white man in the eye? It seems to me I have talked to them always with one foot raised in flight, with my head fumed in whichever way is furthest from them. Dee, though, she would always look anyone in the eye. Hesitation was no part of her nature. How do
Okay,
I
so
look?
now, yeah, just a minute. So now what is happening in reality? This mother, mama, she's this very heavily built person, and she can kill animals just like that. She's saying, I can do it as good, or like just like any other man. I can kill and clean a hog. Hog is a huge pig, so they use it for meat. It's part of their custom. So, and then what about her? She's very well built with plenty of fat under the skin. So her fat keeps her hot in winter. And she's saying, I'm just tough as a man. I can work outside all day. I can break ice to get water for washing. I can eat pork liver cooked over the open fire. Just immediately after the liver has been taken out of the hog. And then one winter night, what did she do? She knocked down a bull calf, straight in the brain between the eyes with a sledgehammer. So with one knock, she was able to kill that animal, and by evening, the meat was hung up before nightfall. So that's the kind of woman she is. She's this very tough nut kind of a person, very accomplished in all these kind of works. So a tough going person and also very very hardworking. But then what's the thing? But of course, all this does not show on television. So in television, when you find all these mothers and fathers come there to felicitate their successful children, what we don't get to see is the real parents. Actually, the kind of sacrifices, the kind of hard work that they do behind the scene is never told on television. And then in the television, how would she be? I would be like the way my daughter wants me to be. That is 100 pounds lighter skin. Like, look at this. She's being very sarcastic. Uncooked barley pancake. That is a light shade of brown or so. So Dee never liked that part of her. That is that the African thing that they had. So Dee liked these people to be light skinned with hair that was not really African in nature. And then again, back to the TV show, the hair would be all shining bright in that hot, bright neon lights of the studio. And then Johnny Carson, he has a very tough time because the mother is being very quick and witty. But then all this is nothing but a dream, a kind of a make believe. But what is reality? I know this even before I wake up. And what is the reality? Whoever knew a Johnson with a quick tongue. So Johnson is their surname. So all these people, the mother and daughters, the surname is Johnson. So none of them were, we could say, witty with a quick tongue, because black people all the time they had been sidelined by society. They could never speak up. So they are all examples of those kind of people. So all the time, if you are made to keep quiet and not to speak, what would happen to you? You will just lose that ability to speak and be very witty. That is with a quick tongue. So we can even imagine me looking a strange man in the eye. So the reality is she can knock down animals, do all these kind of hard work, but then she cannot even look a strange white man in the eye. And if she had spoken to any a white man, what would have she done? She would have one foot raised in flight, as if she's just ready to run away from there. And then she would try to keep away from them. So this shows the kind of insecurity these people felt with white people, the kind of insecurity, and they never liked their company. That was the way Maggie and the mother was. But then Dee, though, look at Dee. She would always look anyone in the eye. Hesitation was no part of her nature. So you again and again you get this picture of Dee being very, very confident about herself, and she was not at all hesitant, and it was just not a part of her nature. Continue.
How do I look, Mama? Maggie says, showing just enough of her thin body enveloped in pink skirt and red blouse for me to know she's there, almost hidden by the door. Come out in the yard, I say. Have you ever seen a lame animal, perhaps a dog, run over by some careless person rich enough to own a car, sidle up to someone who is ignorant enough to be kind to him? That is the way my Maggie walks. She has been like this, chin on chest, eyes on ground, feet in shuffle, ever since the fire that burned the other house to the ground. Dee is lighter than Maggie, with nicer hair and fuller figure. She is a woman now, though sometimes I forget. How long ago was it that the other house burned? 10 or 12 years. Sometimes I can still hear the flames and feel Maggie's arms sticking to me, her hair smoking and her dress falling off her in little black papery flakes. Her eyes seem stretched open, blazed open by the flames reflecting in them. Dee and I see her standing off under the sweet gum tree she used to dig gum out of, a look of concentration on her face as she watched the last dingy grey board of the house fall in toward the red hot brick chimney. Why don't you do a dance around the ashes? I'd want to ask her. She had hated the house that much. I used to think she hated Maggie too, but that was before we raised money, the church and me, to send her to Augusta to school. She used to read to us without pity, forcing words, lies, other folks' habits, whole lives upon us too, sitting trapped and ignorant underneath her voice. She washed us in a river to make believe, burned us with a lot of knowledge we didn't necessarily need to know, pressed us to hear with the serious way she read, to shove us away at just the movement, like dim wits we seemed about to understand. Dee
Okay.
wanted
Yeah, for a while. So now, again, coming back to the present time. So now Maggie is all dressed up. So she's wearing a pink skirt and red blouse, and she's being a little bit open and friendly with the mother. But with the outside world, including her sister, she's very shy and reticent. So she's still standing inside the house. How do I look and all that? So the mother's saying, "Come out into the yard." So now she's compared to a lame animal, perhaps a dog run over by some careless person rich enough to own a car. And then like, so that's a comparison. You have these kind of dogs who will just come and stick to you looking for some kind of a pity. She was like that. So Maggie is that way. So that's the way way my Maggie walks. So she has been like this, chin on chest. That is, her head is always hung down, eyes on ground, feet is shuffling, not very steady and straight. And this came about since the time that fire burned the other house to the ground. So now she's remembering all that. And we also come to know that Dee is much lighter and very attractive. She has a very nice womanly figure compared to Maggie. So now she's trying to remember when was it that the house burned. Maybe it was 10 or 12 years. Now she's saying, I can still remember that day. And what was happening when the house was burning down? Maggie was sticking to the mother. Her hair was smoking, and we know that Maggie had got burnt, right? Her hair was smoking, and the dress falling off her in little black papery flakes. So she must have run to the mother, all burning. So she can still remember. And what about Dee? When this was happening, she was just standing under another tree, a gum tree. And what was she doing? She was looking with so much of concentration at this burning house. And maybe there was a glint of joy in her to see that house burn down, because she used to hate their older house. So she used to hate it, and she would have been very happy to see that house burn down. So now the mother is remembering that day, and she's saying that, that I wanted to ask her at that time that why don't you do a dance around the fire and the ashes? That's the kind of girl Dee was. Read some more and then we'll stop.
Dee wanted nice things. The yellow organdy dress to wear to her graduation from high school, black pumps to match a green suit she'd made from an old suit somebody gave me. She determined to stare down any disaster in her efforts. Her eyelids would not flicker for minutes at a time. Often I fought off the temptation to shake her. At 16, she had a style of her own and knew what style was. I
Okay,
never
just a
had.
minute. Yeah, yeah. And okay. And we also come to know that she used to hate Maggie also. So she hated all that her family, her tradition, and her people stood for. So she hated all that. And all this was when it was before they managed to get some money together, that is, church and the mother, and they put some money together and they sent her to this place called Augusta, and she was sent to school. And then once she started getting educated, what would she do? She would come back home and she would read whatever she had, the books and the knowledge that she had. She would read to them without pity, and she would force down all these customs and beliefs, all these new knowledge that she acquired from school onto the mother and the other sister, both ignorant. But then the mother is saying, actually, we did not need all these knowledge. But then she would come and trap us, and then she would kind of, see whole lives upon us two sitting trapped and ignorant underneath her voice. So she was this very commanding person. So with the little education, she changed totally. So she washed us in a river of make believe, and she burned us with a lot of knowledge. We didn't necessarily need to know. The mother saying we didn't need all this, but then she would come and tell us all these things, and maybe there was some kind of a superiority complex in the daughter, and she was trying to give a little bit of that knowledge or whatever that she had to the mother and the daughter. But then the attitude that she had was not of compassion, that she was showing her superiority. So she was very serious in the way she read, and then she would show us away, show us this kind of just push us away like dimwits. So she treated us like idiots and stupids. And then the moment we understood something that she was reading, what would she do? She would lose interest and she would just push us away like dimwits. The way we deal with people who are idiots and ignorance. So people who don't actually deserve our time and energy. So she used to treat us like that. And look at D, she wanted only nice things. So she still remembers the kind of the dress she wore for graduation from high school, yellow organdy dress, black pumps, black sandals to match a green suit she had made from an old suit somebody gave me. So she was a fashionista from that time onwards. And she was determined to stare down any disaster in her effort. So she would make the best of whatever was available. And then sometimes, she would be so hard pressed and focusing on something, it would be like she would not even blink. And at times she would be lost in that kind of a thought wherein the mother would feel like just shaking her up. And at 16, D already had a style of her own, and she knew what style was. So 16 is actually no age to call oneself a fashionista, but then there she was. She really knew what to wear, how to carry herself, how to speak. So you have somebody very, very confident about herself, and she always wanted to get away from all this. Just read two more paragraphs and we'll stop.
I never had an education myself. After second grade, the school was closed down. Don't ask me why. In 1927, colored asked fewer questions than they do now. Sometimes Maggie reads to me. She stumbles along good naturedly but can't see well. She knows she is not bright. She like good looks and money. Quickness passes her by. She will marry John Thomas, who has mossy teeth and an honest face, and they'll then I'll be free to sit here and I guess just sing church songs to myself. Although I never was a good singer, never could carry a tune, I was always better at a man's job. I used to love to milk till I was hooked on the side in 49. Cows are soothing and slow and don't bother you unless you try to milk them in a wrong way. I have deliberately turned my back on the house. It is three rooms just like the one that burned, except the roof is tin. They don't make shingle roofs anymore. There are no real windows, just some holes cut on the sides, like portholes in a ship, but not round and not square, with rawhide holding the shutters up on the outside. This house is in a pasture too, like the other one. No doubt when Dee sees it, she will want to tear it down. She wrote me once that no matter where we choose to live, she will manage to come see us. But she'll never bring her friends. Maggie and I thought about this, and Maggie asked me, Mama, when did Dee ever have any friends? She had a
Okay.
few.
Yeah, we'll stop here. Okay. So now what is she saying? So we know that T had an education. She was really educated. She knew the way of the world. She was very smart. But then the mother, she's saying, I did not have an education. That is, she went to school up to the second standard. After that, the school closed down, but she did not know why it was closed down, and that was in the year 1927. 1927, wherein um, apartheid and racism and all these kind of things were still valid and legal. So, and under that, what happened? black people, they never dare to question. So they asked very fewer questions than they do now. But now things have changed. So you have people being very confident and asking, fighting for their rights. And sometimes she's saying, Maggie reads to me. So she stumbles along good naturedly but can't see well. We know that, so now Maggie cannot see properly also. So her vision is not very, you could say, bright, maybe after that fire. So it has even dimmed her eyesight. She knows she's not very bright. So we come to know that Maggie is not very bright. So, like good looks and money, quickness passes her by. So, Maggie is not at all blessed in any of these manners. That is, she does not have good looks, she does not have money, and she's not that very bright. So, she's this very homely kind of a girl. So now her future is going to be like this, that she'll be marrying this young chap called John Thomas. So he has mossy teeth and an earnest face. So he's also not that very good looking. And then what is she saying? So once I get the daughter married, I'll be free. So I'll be sitting here in the yard and maybe just singing church songs to myself. And then she's saying, but then I was never a good singer. I could never even carry a tune. Then she's saying, okay, these are all actually ladylike things, right? Singing and being nice and beautiful. All these are all things associated with people who are very ladylike, gentle, docile, beautiful. But then what is she? We have already seen she describes herself as more masculine than feminine. So I was always better at a man's job. And then she tells us about her love for milking cows. Those were the kind of things she liked: milking cows, taking care of the house, knocking down animals and killing them, skinning them, and then hanging up the meat. The tough jobs that usually are reserved for men. She used to do all that. Now, what is she saying? But now I don't care much about the house anymore. And there's a description of the house. There are 3 rooms, and the house is just like their previous house that was burned down. So there are 3 rooms, and now this particular house, it has its roof made of tin. Earlier, it used to be of shingle, something like a wooden kind of a thing. So these kind of things are no more there, and instead of windows you have some kind of portholes are those holes in a ship through which you can put what you call the guns, right? Through which the guns can be put outside the ship. So they look like portholes, these windows, they look like portholes. And then this house is again situated in the grassy land pasture, just like the previous house. So now the mother saying, I'm sure that Dee, when she sees this house, so we again come to know that Dee has not seen this house. So after the fire, maybe something happened and Dee went away, maybe to the boarding school or whatever. So now she has not seen the house, so she's coming for the first time to this new house. So the mother's sure that Dee will not like this house also. So I'm sure that she would want to tear it down. And then once she had written a letter to the mother that no matter where we choose to live, see the word put in quotes, as if they had a choice, right? When you lose your home, when you have nothing, you don't have much choice, right? So she wrote a letter saying that wherever you choose to live, I'll come and see you. That is, she's being very kind as a daughter, promising that she'll come and see the mother and sister. But then she also mentioned that she'll never bring her friends. This shows how ashamed she was of her background, her home, and her family. So Maggie and mother, they discussed all this between them, Maggie and Mama. So Maggie is asking after this, like, when did Dee ever have any friends? So from this we come to know what kind of a superficial kind of a person Dee is. She's this fashionista. She's like a social butterfly who would flit from one person to the other, maybe looking for opportunities, but then not really forming meaningful and beautiful relationships, which Maggie understood. That's why she's asking the mother that when did Dee ever have any friends? Okay, so we stop here. I hope the story is clear to you till now.